Hello, welcome back to Will I Vike It? Today I'm back at the Ancient Technology Centre and my guest is Bill Meaden from Cranborne Chase Cider. So welcome, Bill.
How you doing?
Good, yeah. So this is actually the first time we've met, so I don't know a lot about what you do. So perhaps you can sort of introduce your company and how you got started.
Yep. Okay. So I've been making cider as Cranborne Chase Cider for 11 years now. Started as a bit of a hobby, really. And there was an orchard up the road. Apples used to go to waste, and it just seemed a shame to see them rotting on the floor. So we came up with the idea of bringing the apples back to the farm, pressing them, and turning the juice into cider.
Was it something that you started off with homebrew or anything, or did
Yeah,
you?
so I kind of I was 19 when I started Cranborne Chase Cider, so fairly young in terms of only been a year legally drinking, so not too much experience with making homebrew. But my parents, from a young age, always making country wines, demijohns bubbling away in front of the fire.
Yeah, sounds like my house.
Yeah, it's kind of something I sort of grew up with, really. I think I made my first drop of cider with just apples from the bottom of the garden at the age of 15, because you couldn't go out and buy alcohol, so why not make it,
I never really thought of that until it was sort of, I was legally able to drink before I thought about making my own.
And so, got a bit of a taste. I think my first cider was made using russet apples, the rough skinned.
I've got them in the garden.
Yeah, really nice actually on their own and make a lovely cider. A lot of the ciders I've brought along today use traditional sort of Dorset West Country cider apples, so tannic, heavy, bittersweet cider apples. So that's what we've got here today. But you can make cider out of any apple, and going back and through the ages, they probably would have. So.
Yeah, I think historically they used things like crab apples to bring the bitterness.
Yeah, crab apples. And, crab apples have quite a lot of tannin in naturally, but the levels are just not really tested as such, whereas a lot of the modern cider apples and even heritage cider apples, they knew what they were doing. They knew to get the right balance of sugar, acidity and tannin to make a balanced drink.
I think, I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think aren't some of the sugars in cider apples not fermentable, so you still end up with a residual sweetness?
More so in Perry pears,
right.
But you do get a few which will have high levels of sugar. And when the tree gets old and the nutrients deplete in the soil, some of those sugars won't get fermented because it hasn't got the nutrients in the juice to ferment right down. So that's when you get a naturally sweet cider. You can also do things like arresting the fermentation. So a process called keeving, which has come from France. The Normans brought it over with some of their cider apples and their technology. And so you can keeve a cider to make a naturally sweet, naturally sparkling cider, which is what we got there. It's Secco. So it's probably 80% fermented, 20% unfermented sugars in there. And we cork it, cap it off, so the CO2 can't escape and it goes back into drink and carbonates itself. So it's a naturally sparkling cider. No added sugars, no pasteurization. It's as natural as you get in modern day cider making to a naturally sweet cider.
Is that the same with all of them? Do you go natural ferments on them?
Natural fermentation, so wild yeast, no added yeast in any of our ciders that we make. Our dry cider isn't back sweetened at all, so it just ferments right down to dry, use up all of its natural sweetness. Produces a 6.5% cider. Whereas the Secco, because we use that keeving process, only gets down to about sort of 4.5, 4.8, sometimes 5%, but it keeps that natural sweetness and the fizz, which is quite nice, a bit different. Whereas a lot of the ones that go right down to dryness tend to be still, flat, no carbonation. But more modern techniques, you've got the Shepherdess here. This has been filtered, force carbonated, so chilled down, CO2 forced into it, and then back sweetened with cane sugar, which is, I'd say, how probably 95% of all the cider in the UK is made. It's probably.
I find a lot of them too sweet.
Too sweet, yeah. They're all back sweet, and
they often taste sort of like the artificial sweetness sort of flavour you get.
Yeah.
And stuff.
So, with sugars, fairly expensive, sweetener's cheaper. So with a lot of the bigger cider producers, they'll be using sweetener as well as sugar.
Yeah.
Whereas with the Shepherdess, we're just using granulated sugar to back sweeten it. Some are sweetened more than others, depending on how, if you want it dry, medium, sweet. So dry tends to have no sugar added. Medium, you're adding back sort of 10%. And sweet might be 20% sugar added back.
So how did you learn your trade? Because you're saying you started quite young with starting the company up.
Trial and error. Yeah, a lot of trial and error. But also a lot of, I've got the benefit of being a fairly young cider maker. And the older cider makers, there's a bit of a gap, and there's a bit of a sort of a period where nobody was making cider, and orchards were getting ripped out in sort of the 80s, and from the 60s to the 80s, and nobody was going into cider making then, really. And a lot of them were sort of dying out. Sort of the farm cider makers were all these skills were getting lost. So now if someone young comes into the industry, there's a lot of help out there, and a lot of keen cider producers who are willing to pass on their knowledge. So I've learnt a lot from other people. Reading books, there's a lot more written about cider nowadays than there ever used to be back in history. So you can learn a lot from reading books or off the internet. But the main thing is learning about the apples. I'd say that's probably what's helped me the most in cider making. Is learning about different types of cider apples, different varieties, and how they produce different drinks. And learning how to put them into a blend properly to make a nice balanced drink, and a consistent product year to year. If you're trying to sell something, it needs to be fairly similar year on year.
People want to know what they're getting, don't they? Once you've found a cider you like, you're gonna.
They want it to be the same next time.
Which doesn't happen with my homebrew.
No, well, that's but that is, you still get a little bit of that. Which is, I think it's quite nice, and that's why I enjoy making cider. Every now and then nature will throw you a curveball, so you'll have an exceptionally sunny year, and that will spike up the sugars in the apple juice, making the cider exceptionally strong that year.
So you'd have had more sugar this year with all the
this year was great for high sugar content. So we're going to see some sort of 7-8% ciders. Whereas normally they'd come out at 6-7%.
Right.
Which is it's nice from our point of view, because it adds a bit of diversity to the cider year on year. Also different soil types make a big difference to flavours you get from your apples. So whereas we're on quite chalky soil underneath our orchards, which takes a lot longer for the trees to get established, but once they get established and gets their roots into the chalk, they never really suffer in a drought year. So we always be all right in a drought year. And they take a lot of minerals and nutrients from the chalk, which you wouldn't get from a clay soil. So we'll get different flavour profiles from the same apple varieties grown on chalk as you would from clay, or sand or loam or
That's interesting. I didn't know that.
You can use exactly the same apples, the same recipe as a producer in a different county, and it will taste completely different.
Awesome. Well, shall we try some of yours? Obviously, I did mention to you before, I brought some as well. So the one that doesn't look as good.
It looks
this
great.
is mine. It's a little bit young.
Not filtered.
I think it probably will clear, because when I've made it before, it's cleared. But I thought it might be a nice one for you to try if you haven't already.
No, give it.
So this one is my neighbour's parents gave me some cider apples. Don't ask me the kinds, because I'm not going to remember it now. But I fermented them naturally, so just pressed, left them to ferment, and then when they finished, I added some honey. It fermented again until it stopped, and that was probably about 2 weeks ago. So it is very young at the moment, but I thought, we can compare and contrast.
Give it a go.
Compare notes. What should we do? Should we start with your ones, I think, and then...
Okay, so this is quite I brought this one along basically because it's going to be similar to what was being made back along before they had filters and artificial sugar and the knowledge of keeving and things like that. So this is just a dry cider made using bittersweet cider apples. It's quite it's almost a little bit bitter. It's full juice, so it's not being watered down at all. It's a little bit oxidized as well, so it's really kind of quite
very dark color as well.
Yeah, quite true in keeping to what they would have made. You know, they wouldn't have had the stainless steel fermentation tanks and ways of keeping the cider at its optimum. So you would have had something that's a little bit there's no nasty. It's not starting to turn to vinegar at all, but it's just darker, deeper flavors. This is from 2021, so it's not the same as 2022's dry. Each year, it's sort of, I'm still tweaking some of the recipes to get them how I want. The dry is one of them. I think I've pretty much capped off the shepherdess. Now that goes out in our kegs for pubs and stuff. And the Dorseca, I'm quite happy with the recipe in that as well. But yeah, the dry is one I'm still sort of working on. Even 11 years on, you only get one shot each year to play around with different recipes. So
yeah, sure. Yeah, let's give this one a go. It's very dry, that one.
It's dry. It gets the side of your tongue.
Yeah. That's nice though, because sometimes when they're dry, they're also really sour, almost vinegary, aren't they?
Yeah.
Whereas that's not got that at all.
There's no sharpness to it.
No.
I don't think there was hardly any sharp apples go into it. It's almost, I think, where it's sort of slightly older, it's almost got a little bit of a sort of sweetness come back to it.
Yeah.
Almost like a bit of a brandy sort of edge to it, where it's gone so dark, which isn't really, it's not a commercial trait that I'd want to be putting forward, but it's something to showcase how it would have been done and what you would have.
Yeah, because historically, I mean, obviously I do the Vikings and the Saxon period, and as we were saying before, like they don't really have any evidence that they did it. But then most of our evidence comes from the written record.
Yeah.
Which is, the church were writing stuff down.
Yeah.
But they're importing, grapes and wines from Rome because they can afford to do it. So your day-to-day person,
they wouldn't have been interested in what the farm workers and the everyday.
And the birds work it out. The birds are eating the rotten apples off the floor in my garden. And shouting around the garden.
Yeah.
It might be a good one for to make a Saxon cider.
Yeah.
Sort of like a mulled one.
Yeah.
But with herbs and things.
Yeah.
And because I had honey to it, obviously the drier one.
Yeah.
So if you don't mind, I'll stick some on the fire once we're chatting.
Yeah.
And we'll mull it up and see how it compares. Yeah.
No, it's definitely a good one for that. Try the vintage next. So again, this is a still farmhouse cider. Back sweetened a slight amount. So only just a touch of back sweetening with granulated sugar.
Yeah.
Not filtered. So just natural clarity in there, which is actually quite clear.
It is, yeah.
And this is aged in an oak whiskey barrel.
Oh, nice.
So all of our vintage tends to get aged in a whiskey barrel.
I can smell its rosemary from my hands now.
Yeah. So you've got a much more cidery nose to it than the dry. And again, sort of as cider went on from the dry, I think they probably would have started, they wouldn't have had stainless steel vats, they would have had the oak barrels. So again, a fairly traditional sort of take, and I think it's how cider's probably been made for the last 200-300 years. In the West Country, and we sell a lot of this as probably our second most popular cider.
Yeah, it's nice. It's not overly sweet. It's just got a little bit of a sweeter edge to it than the dry one.
Yeah, so we'd call it medium dry.
Yeah. I think that would be my level.
Yeah.
Cider. I think that's nice.
Yeah, and you get that. You get that little spike of sweetness, but then the dryness coats your mouth.
You can really taste the apples in there as well.
Yeah. You got real cidery nose to it as well. I think it really pops out the glass.
Yeah, very nice. So I know the other thing I spoke to you online about we were going to talk a bit about wassailing.
Yes.
I'm going to put this episode out in time for the Wassail.
Yeah.
And I know you don't know an awful lot, so I'm not going to not going to try and catch you out there. But if you do know anything,
So
we can have. I've got a little bit of knowledge about it.
Yeah, it's a tradition, sort of an old folk tradition, which they've kind of rediscovered and rekindled over the years, to bring it back. And I think it's to try and also they've tried to make it nowadays more about making cider popular all year round.
Yeah.
So a lot of people see cider as just a summer drink, and I drink beer in the winter and cider in the summer. And we want cider to be an all year round drink, and in some cases try and rival wine, and sparkling drinks. So wassailing, I think it's a great part of our heritage, our history, and it basically is a tradition of blessing the apple trees, for a prosperous crop the next year. So the whole idea is you light lots of fires in the orchard. Normally you light 13.
Okay.
So one for every month of the year, and a Judas fire which you stamp out as soon as you light the other.
Right. I've not actually heard of that version of it.
So this is there's many different adaptations of how a wassail should be run and how people run it, but basically as long as everyone's having a good time, they go out in the orchard, they make lots of noise, you bang pots and pans, you light up the orchard. So the fires were there to light up the orchard, signify the 12 months. Lots of noise to scare away the demons, the evil spirits from the orchard. You fire a shotgun or a musket through the trees. That's another tradition.
I've heard of that one being done because some people hang toast from the tree.
Yeah,
so sometimes they shoot the toast.
Yeah.
In some places.
Yeah. So hanging toast, that's an offering. So toast for the birds and for the gods as well.
I do wonder whether the toasting historically would link back to the wassail word is actually Old English to begin with.
Yeah.
And so originally it was like a greeting, and then it became a toast, and gradually it was then used for sort of coming into more like what you're saying.
Yeah.
So whether there's a significance to toast and toasting.
Yeah. Wassail, good health.
Yes, that's it.
That's
and the response is drink hail. Traditionally.
Yeah. So drink to good health.
Yeah.
So and it's the toast is they dunk it in cider normally and then hang it from the trees, and then you pour the remaining cider around the base of the tree. Normally you're carrying out the ceremony around the biggest, highest bearing tree in the orchard. So you go to your best tree as such, and that's like the mother tree. So there's lots of singing, dancing, and normally, traditionally, you have a big feast. You feed everyone really well. Everyone drinks lots of cider and is merry and cheery, and they are great fun, and I'd highly recommend if you can get to a local wassail, go to one. Bringing them into the modern century, and you've got bands playing and
you usually get someone dressed up as a green man.
The
old Morris dance.
The Morris dances are normally there.
It's fun.
Yeah, they are fun. Like the whole history of where it started. I'm not going to go into that because I'm a bit vague on really.
I know briefly. So it originally appears in a 12th century legend where the daughter of Hengist presents the future king Vortigern with a bowl of mulled wine and the cheer wassail, which he replies, drink hail. So that's the first time the two words are used together. But it does also appear in Beowulf, which I don't think they know exactly when that was. I think that's 8th to 11th century, they think it was written. It appears as Wassail, the rider sleepeth, the hero far hidden. No harp resounds in the courts, no wassail as once was heard. So the words date back into and then even you're saying about your French influence of the cider, actually, I've written another one down, which is an Anglo-Norman poet. And they wrote a poem about the Battle of Hastings. And so they wrote, rejoice and wassail, pass the bottle and drink healthy, drink backwards and drink to me, drink half and drink empty. So from there, I know it moved on to being something that wealthy people did in their houses.
Right.
and they would,
their own
sort of-
orchards and
yeah.
yeah.
And then eventually that moves on to people actually doing it door to door.
Yeah.
And I think it's connected with the Welsh, what's it, Mary Lou, the horse's head?
Yeah.
The door to door, and you go around, which I think now in England is more replaced with carol singing, sort of that time of year.
Yeah.
But yeah, they would have gone door to door with an offering bowl
Yeah.
with some cider or mulled wine in it.
Yeah.
And you'd offer it to the person in exchange for gifts.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So yeah, it's kind of progressed to that, and then, like you say, it died off for a while, I think, and then it's had a.
It's rekindled. I think with people gone back into it.
I think paganism's gone back up though, hasn't it?
Yeah,
It's one of the most sort of popular things at the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is,
And offering to the gods for a prosperous year. So yeah, I'm all up for wassailing. You know, if it brings me more apples and a good reliable crops, I'm happy with that. So.
I also see it as mindfulness, because I'm not religious in any way. But even sort of people that are heathen and things and sort of make toast to Odin and Thor, to me, it's that stopping and being thankful for what you've got, for your food, for your drink.
Yeah.
You know, even with Christianity, they do the same thing.
Yeah.
But if you take away God, to me, it's just stopping for a moment and saying, well, hang on.
Appreciating what we've got.
And so giving something back to the apple tree, it's sort of like acknowledging that, if you like. And it would be the same with if you made a toast to Odin.
Yeah.
Pour some mead away. You're not wasting the mead. You're being mindful that this mead is valuable.
Yeah.
And so we're gonna.
Yeah.
That's how I see it.
Yeah. That's I think it's a great thing we've brought back, and it's like we don't hold a wassail, but partly because our orchard's so disconnected from the farm, and it would be hard to host it publicly.
You could probably do one here.
Yeah, we could do one here.
Have a chat with Andy.
Yeah. We are looking into, we're planting an orchard this winter behind our cider shed, which will be ideal location for future wassails and stuff. It'll all tie in nicely.
I think you've got a roundhouse too, right?
We do have a roundhouse, yeah.
That's all I know. I don't know anything
roundhouse.
else about it than that.
Yeah.
Just only mentioned in passing.
Yeah, we've got lots of archaeology on the farm. There's a Roman villa, and Time Team actually came out in 2004, I think. Bodies on the Cranborne Chase, if anyone wants to check it out on
I'll have to have a look back. I don't remember that one.
Channel 4. You wouldn't have seen me in it. I was probably at school or something. But yeah, they're trying to link two historic sites on the farm. So the villa and a burial ground on the other side of the farm. They're trying to link the two together.
Yeah.
Basically, I won't ruin the end of it. You'll have to watch it.
I'm sure it's old enough, I think.
Yeah. They worked out that the settlement where the burial site was on the other side of the farm died out probably 50 years before the Roman villa was built.
Okay.
So we did get an answer from the Time Team on what happened.
Nice.
And they do actually do that whole 3-day thing. They come in, excavate, and they are gone. It's like over in a flash.
Wow.
Yeah, it's quite incredible, really.
Yeah. What made you build the roundhouse? Was that your parents, or did you do?
So that was dad's sort of project, really. We wanted somewhere. Obviously, we're in an area of outstanding natural beauty. Planning permission can be a bit of a pain.
Yeah.
We wanted to have a place where, when groups come out, we can meet and introduce them. And so mainly sort of like little school groups and stuff, and a point of interest. And so we built this roundhouse as a meeting room, because we couldn't get planning permission for one, for an actual brick built meeting house. So built one out of natural resources. Still had to go for planning permission for it.
Yeah, I guess, but they probably count more temporary, I guess.
Yeah, it's a temporary building. Yeah. So, but it's great. It's sort of, when people turn up to the farm, like, wow, what's that? You know, and then you can explain about the other. It's a talking point which sparks off the introduction to the history about the rest of the farm, really. We've got a little museum and a shepherd's hut on the farm, which displays a lot of the finds which were found during the excavations from Time Team and previous sort of Bournemouth University digs on the farm.
Does the farm do anything else? Is that
we're mainly an arable farm now.
Yeah.
We've got about 280 acres.
Yeah.
We farm about 330. And with the orchards and bits and pieces. But yeah, we're in a free crop rotation, so wheat for bread, biscuits or animal feed, barley for brewing beer, and oilseed rape for mainly biofuel now, but occasionally we'll grow some that's used for cooking oil and stuff. And the cider is my sort of diversification to be able to stay on the farm.
Yeah.
So we used to be a mixed farm. When my dad first started farming, he started up an outdoor pig herd. So we had 200 outdoor sows, and my uncle had a dairy herd, and then they did the arable cropping in between. And so it was a proper mixed farm that provided for two families. Now it's an arable farm that provides half of my dad's living. So I have to do something different to bring in money to be able to stay here on the planet.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough.
Yeah.
And also, it like you say, it means that you can stay on the farm. You don't have to move off somewhere else, somewhere different if you like it.
The thing I love most about cider is working in the orchards and working in a natural environment where you're outside. Most of the time, you're connected with nature. You're nurturing trees so that they produce a good crop, so that you can make a natural product with very little intervention really. You can make something by just extracting the juice of an apple that's enjoyable to drink as apple juice or as cider. We don't just make cider, we make apple juice as well. So that involves pasteurizing it so it doesn't turn into cider. But
I think in America they call apple juice cider too, don't they?
Yeah,
So it's really confusing.
they call apple juice cider, and cider is hard cider.
Yeah, that's it.
Hard cider.
Gets confusing. I'm just going to check on this mold stuff because we don't want to overcook.
Oh yeah, it's steaming away there.
It is steaming. We might be all right.
That should be good to
reckon so.
pull away from the heat, I reckon.
Let's have a look. So this was your driest cider, wasn't it? That we put in this one, and then honey, rosemary, and juniper. So that'll really smell the rosemary.
Oh yeah, that's
actually took the rosemary from
lovely.
The Roman villa.
Nice. Okay.
Just before you turned up.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's freshly picked.
Freshly picked rosemary.
Well, it's not massively hot, but that's sweetened up quite a bit.
Oh yeah. Yeah, the honey's definitely doing its job there, isn't it?
Slightly medicinal with the rosemary. Might be too much rosemary, maybe. Yeah.
It's nice though. It's a pleasant drink. It's I think it's all about experimenting. And whenever I've made mold cider, I just chuck the mold spice in and a few cinnamon quills, and occasionally chuck in a glug of gin or whiskey or brandy or something, just to
absolutely,
make it even stronger.
Chuck it some cake as well.
Yeah, let's go for it. Yeah. But no, that rosemary it's lovely. It lifts the nose. It makes it much more
different flavour.
Yeah.
So this cake is based on a German apple cake, but I've substituted. My wife's got a dairy allergy.
Yeah.
So nearly every time I make a cake, I put wine or mead in instead.
Yeah.
Because you're only adding a tiny drop. It's not a lot.
Just to moisten it up.
But I did make this hastily last night, so hopefully it's all right.
It looks lovely.
If anyone wants the recipe, it's in one of my cookbooks. This is a shameless plug. So yeah.
Look at that. That's
I was making this about 10 o'clock last night.
It's good. It's got a good amount of sort of moisture in it.
So rather than the mead, with this one I've added the Cyser, which is one I'll get you to try in a bit.
That's lovely.
Not too bad, is it? And that's actually apple from our garden as well.
So do you dice up the apple and add it to the dough?
No, the apples are just the bit that's on the top.
Okay, yeah. So that's just a bit of the moisture from those go in. Yeah.
Remember the recipe off the top of my head now. I made about 3 or 4 different things last night. What is it? Flour, sugar, So Cyser in this case rather than mead.
Yep.
There's cinnamon on top as well with a dusting of sugar. What else would be in there? Eggs.
Yep.
It's a pretty standard cake batter,
Yep.
but instead of the milk, it's got the Cyser in there. And then apples on top. But it's the sort of thing we would make at home when we were wassailing. So we do wassail for our trees.
Yep.
And we'll make a cake. Often we'll cut rounds of apple out and hang them from the tree with the toast as well.
Okay. Yeah. Nice. Yep.
Just kind of
Decorate it.
make it your own thing. Yeah, and also the birds come along and eat it after sort of a week or so.
Yeah. It's a little bit of a feast for them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's giving back a little bit. Like you say, you feed a bit of cider to the trees.
Yep.
If we haven't got cider, then we'll use a bit of mead or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just that mindfulness thing again, I think.
Yeah.
Giving back. I don't know what type of apple they are. I know I've got russets in the garden, but they were there when we moved in. And then I've got whatever that is.
So they're quite a late apple. Or did you
I picked
pick them and stored them? Yep.
But they are starting to turn, some of them.
All right. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. You get some apples. It's amazing. You get some apples that are ready in August. I think Beauty of Bath is one of the earliest eating apples, which is ready in August, late August normally. And then you get apples that will store through until April. You drive along the roads and you see a lot of these wild apple trees on the side of the roads where birds have deposited and sprung an apple tree. They tend to hang on a bit later, and I think that's more traditionally what we've been about. We've kind of bought a lot of the apples forward so that we've got a wider season. We've selected different strains and breeds and varieties to give us a wider window for harvesting and making the most of the fruit, really. Some of the late season apples are lovely. They've really got high amounts of sugar in. I've got a few in the front of my van. On the dashboard, rolling around. But yeah,
it's the russets in the garden. They don't last at all. I've tried storing them and they don't keep for sometimes weeks. They start to rot.
Yeah, I find the russet's best sort of eating them fresh off the tree.
Yeah, they're delicious.
Or you can put them in your fruit bowl for 3 or 4 days, but they tend to go a bit fluffy. Quite like a crunchy apple.
Yeah, they have that weird sort of, like you say, fuzzy
skin. Yeah.
Yeah. They're almost like a pear texture as well, aren't they?
Yeah.
Kind of grainy.
So, the russeting on the skin. Russets are one of the sweetest apple varieties that we know of, and that the russeting on the skin allows for more solar sun penetration, which enhances the amount of sugar that's produced.
Okay.
So you get some apples that'll have like a russet lacing over the skin.
Yeah.
And that sort of lacing also increases the sugar content. So there's a cider apple called Golden Bull, which is from Dorset. It's a sharp Dorset cider apple. And that's got a russet lacing, which I think it's probably been chosen because of that lacing and the high sugar content to go forward as a Dorset cider apple, which is why it's still around today. So.
It's quite drinkable.
Yeah,
on
definitely.
a Saturday afternoon.
Yeah. No, that the honey's really worked its magic on just lifting that dried. You don't get the bitterness from the.
Which maybe would be a good step for the next one, is to try this Cyser.
Yeah.
Because that's got the honey in it too.
There you go.
And as I say, that's because of the way I've fermented it. It's just fermented right out, so it's relatively dry when I add the honey.
Yep.
But it's the first time I've used this combo of apples. Previously, I've used the russets.
Okay, in the garden.
Whatever the red apples are that are on the cake.
Yep.
And I've done a blend of the two.
Yep.
And then added the honey at the end. And that's always come out quite pleasant. Yeah.
I find cider made from russet apples almost has like a French cidery taste. It's a really pleasant, easy drinking cider.
Yeah. Let's just say apologies. It's a little bit younger than I would normally drink it, but I didn't know whether it was something you would have tried before, so I thought it would be nice to bring it along.
The cork's not fired out, so it can't be that young.
It's not too bad.
It's not lively. Yeah, it's not.
No, it's definitely stopped fermenting.
Yeah.
I checked it over a few days. Yeah, but it's just usually I find it. I mean, I haven't tried these apples, but usually over time it clears naturally.
Yeah, yeah.
So probably by spring, summertime, it should be a bit more drinkable.
Yeah.
But I have tried this one, and it's not too bad, to be honest.
So so how much honey do you add in comparison to cider? Do you measure it out, or do you just do it by?
No, I did work it out first. So what I based it on was more of, do you know what a braggot is? No, so a bragot's another historical drink, which is like somewhere between mead and ale.
Okay, right.
So basically you brew your ale, but it's got extra sugar in there.
Yeah.
So it ferments to sort of 8-9%.
Okay, yeah.
So I based my maths off of a braggot that I made before.
Recipe, yeah.
Yeah. So I think what I did was there's about 6 gallons of juice.
Yeah.
And there's about 12 jars of honey in there.
Okay, yeah.
You know, your standard.
Yeah.
What are they, 340 grams?
Yeah.
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 Yeah, and so that's what that is there.
Yeah.
And then just left it. And as I say, the fermentation had died completely off.
Yeah.
As soon as you add the honey, within a day, it's foaming again and it's back.
Yeah.
They've got the sugar that they need and they're off again.
Yeah.
Yeah. So very much based on a braggot. I don't know historically how far back it goes, as Cyser.
Yeah. That's you got that cider smell, real good cider smell, but then it's almost like I'd say it's like a medium cider. It's not definitely not a dry cider.
No.
Or cider.
But it's still got quite a tanginess from the apples.
Yeah, it's got that sort of that bit of sweet bite to the back of your throat a little bit.
As I say, I was given the apples, but I think they were a combo of sweet, medium, and dry.
Yeah, it's a tannic, sharp. Yeah.
So that's ended up where we have, because not being a producer, I didn't know what to do with it. So I'll just do a blend of all three and it should come out balanced.
And that was cider apples picked and pressed in October, roughly, probably.
God, when was it? Might have been November. I think they got them to me quite late in the end.
Oh, yeah.
As I say, they come from my neighbour's parents.
Yeah.
And they had to drive down with a big dumpy bag.
Yeah.
Stuck it in the back of the car.
Nice. Yeah.
And then I spent about a week of evenings after work pressing them. Yeah. So I think it was probably, I reckon probably November.
Yeah. Oh, they would have been.
Yeah.
So that's normally another mistake a lot of cider makers or budding cider makers make, is picking the apples far too early. A lot of people go, I've picked these apples and they've picked them off the tree in August. And I'm like, well, that apple's not ready until November. So you're going to have a very starchy product.
Yes, you have less sugar if you pick them.
That's it. You have less sugar and a lot of sediment, and normally really dark juice because everything's oxidized so quickly.
I often pick the ones up off the floor that are already rotting.
It's the best way because if it's fallen off the tree, it's ripe. If it's sat on the floor for a few weeks, it's nice and soft. And so your equipment that you're using to mill up the apples and press the apples is going to struggle so much less.
Yeah.
If the apple's already partially sort of broken down as such. There's one February day we were out pruning in the orchard. And a late variety of cider apple sort of still hung on the trees. The majority had fallen, but there were a few still on the trees. You're never going to get everything. It's always good to leave some for the birds, but there were these black daminates which had hung on to this tree. We were out pruning in February. Got to this apple and it looked almost perfect.
Yeah.
But then you look at it closely and you can see it bubbling and it's fermenting on the tree. And so my friend Brad was there and I said, Brad, come over here. I picked up one of the apples and I said, open your mouth. I got the apple and I squeezed it into his mouth and all the juice flowed out. And he said, that's the best thing I've ever tasted. He said, it's like semi-sweet cider. And when I tasted it, the closest thing I could describe it to was the Dorsecco, the key cider. And I think it's because it's February, it's sort of 3-4 degrees outside. It's had that slow fermentation. The apple would have ripened in probably December, so 2 months of slow fermentation.
Yeah.
All cocooned in its little apple skin.
Isn't it? It stayed intact.
Yeah. And the birds hadn't got it.
Yeah. We had when we moved into our house about 3 years ago, I made the mistake of building a pond under the apple tree. During the winter, it filled up with apples.
Yep.
And then suddenly realised it's foaming.
Yeah.
The pond itself was turning into cider.
Fish are all floating around.
Next summer, I moved the pond.
Yeah. My mum's got an apple tree above her pond, and she puts a net over it, and every year she's there with a fishing net hooking out the apples.
Yeah.
It's hard work.
Yeah. So I had a bunch of drunk frogs walking.
Yeah. Now that Cyser is lovely. That's really an easy drink. I bet that's quite deceptive. I bet you a few glasses of that and you're stumbling.
Probably, It's probably about 7 or 8%, I would have said.
Yeah.
So it's weaker than a wine, but stronger than a average cider.
Yeah. Most ciders will come out at 6.5%, 7%. So that's
that little bit stronger,
and it's added that sweetness to it. And it's. I should imagine it remains like that, does it? Once it's
yeah. The only real difference over age is it will clear and as you know, like flavours start to mellow a little bit, don't they, over time?
Yeah.
I did try to prove that. I think I might have mentioned this on a previous podcast.
Right.
But I did try to prove it once with mead.
Yeah.
Because I was convinced that aging doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
And I've read that people have won first prize in competitions for meads that were like a couple of weeks old and things.
Yeah.
So wow, it's probably nonsense.
Yeah.
And I tried one that I'd made fresh versus one that was, I think, 2, maybe 3 years old.
Yeah.
And I was adamant that I'd drink it and be like, see, it's a load of bollocks. I took one sip and that was my reaction was, bollocks.
Yeah.
I don't know, it's sort of taken on like an almondy flavour, which it didn't have originally. It just, the flavours had completely changed.
Yeah.
Different profile. Yeah.
No, I think aging definitely makes a big difference, especially with cider and the more tannic varieties of cider apple. 18 months, you hit a sweet spot. I think cider nowadays is drunk far too young, and that's a lot of the time you haven't got much choice in a supermarket, and so most people don't know about what else is available. But the cider in the supermarkets is probably 3-4 months old, and chaptalized, so back sweetened up to almost sort of 14%. Stored in big tanks and then watered down when they need it. So natural is the best way, and if you can keep it,
that's good. Yeah, there's much more flavour in there, and as I said before, there's not that kind of artificial sweetness kind of back taste to it. Like I wouldn't drink, not to brand shame or anything. Your Strongbows and things. It's I don't find them pleasant to drink.
No, this is a different style of cider.
What's the other one that does all the fruity flavours?
Well, you got the Swedish ones.
Copperberg.
And Fordvig. But a lot of the time they shouldn't really, I don't think, personally, be listed as ciders, because the amount of apple they've seen is very minimal. It's legally in the UK to be classed as a cider. It's got to have 35% apple base.
That's quite low.
And that apple base can be derived from concentrate.
Okay.
So that can be 35% apple concentrate.
Yeah.
Which is really, really low. There's a lot of people lobbying for that to be raised to at least 50%. And that'll really make a big difference to the quality of cider that we're seeing on the supermarket shelves.
Right, so we should probably obviously rush things along a little bit because we've been chatting for quite a while.
Yeah, so we'll go through we've got 2 ciders left to try. So we'll try the Shepherdess.
Yeah.
This is what we call our pub strength cider. So we've got this down to 4.5%. Basically, it's a 75% juice cider. 25% of that is water.
Yeah.
And there's a bit of sugar to back sweeten it, and then obviously force carbonated. So this is quite a modern style cider.
Yeah.
What you'll find, in most pubs out there.
So it's more similar to the general commercial sort of ciders that people expect.
I'll name a few names. Shall I? Your Thatcher's Gold, Stayford Press.
Yeah. I quite like a Stayford actually.
Yeah, Stayford. I find Stayford is a bit more traditional. They use a few more traditional cider apples than I say Thatcher's doing their Thatcher's Gold.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is so we put this into keg as well to go out to the pub. So we do 30 litre and 50 litre kegs to be sold on draft. But we brand that out as the Chase. And obviously this is Shepherdess. So it's 4.5%.
Yeah.
Session cider. Being a business, we need to sell a bit of volume. So selling loads of cider at 6%, 7% isn't particularly great for our sort of margins. People only have 1 or 2 pints or maybe 3 pints and then would have had enough. Whereas with this they'll have maybe 4 or 5.
It's the same with the mead actually. My friend who makes mead makes a session mead.
Yeah.
Which is lower strength, so you can have a few.
Yeah. So it's about drinking responsibly. You shouldn't drink 5 pints in a day, obviously.
Just having a look at your branding and stuff on there. Is there any significance to that? Sort of looks a bit like a coat of arms.
The logo, we obviously when I first started up.
Just show it to the camera so people can see what we're talking about.
So we've got the Cranborne Chase is an ancient hunting ground. So we best have a stag in there. You've got the sort of coat of arms, the plaque it's mounted on. Hunting ground. There's the arrows. Then we thought, well, we're going to put some apples hanging from the antlers.
Is that a keg on his head as well?
In between the antlers, you've got a whiskey barrel.
Yeah.
So when we first started out in 2011, we put all of our cider that we made that year, which was mainly single variety Brown's apple from our orchard. We put it all into whiskey and rum barrels. And we didn't realise that they were, we knew they were freshly emptied, but we didn't realise how much spirit was still floating around in them. So you got like potentially 2 litres of spirit floating around in the bottom of this barrel.
Right.
And you chuck 190 litres of cider, which is going to turn into something that's 6% on top of that, or 7%. You add that 60-70% spirit, 2 litres of, into that cider, and it makes a drink that's about 10%. So the first year, we didn't really gain a great name for ourselves as cider producers in that first year, because they'd have a pint and a half, and they'd be red cheeked and rosy nosed, and lots of good
wine
stories. Lots of good stories. Luckily it was just a bit of a learning curve, and after that first use in the barrel, the whiskies or the rum's dissipated, and you're down to a 7% cider again, which is still strong. But
I think they reuse barrels for all sorts, don't they? Like Worcestershire sauce and stuff.
No, it's and even once they've been used for a lot of the barrels we're buying in now for our vintage. They tend to be bourbon barrels initially. Then they'll get used for Scotch, and then we use them for cider. So they're normally 40, sometimes 50 years old by the time they come to us. Then we'll use them for maybe five years. And once we're done with them, they're then garden furniture, seats.
It's amazing how long they
plant
go on.
pots. And they'll still last another 10, 15 years as a plant pot after we've used them. So, all right, let's crack open this Dorset.
Go for it.
Finish on the fizzy one.
I think what people should do with these drinking ones is go away and buy them all, and then do like a drink along.
So if anyone does want to buy any cider, we do sell online. We can ship throughout the UK, but we've also got a shop on the farm, which is in the summer months open 7 days a week, 9 till 7. In the winter, we're only open sort of shorter hours, but you can always phone us and we'll make a special
Do you do markets and stuff as well?
appearance. Not too much. Do a few festivals and events.
I think you've done some stuff here at the ATC.
Yeah, we do a few things at the
I think
ATC.
you've sort of been sat around
Yeah,
the
we
corner there. And
normally do like the Apple Day in
That's
September.
right, yeah.
But yeah, the I'd say sort of we sell 1/3 of our cider through our farm shop. 1/3 goes out to festivals and events in the summer, and then the other 1/3 is probably pubs and little local village shops and stuff. So it's all fairly well balanced at the moment. Right, pop.
Oh, nice sound.
There we go. So yeah, you've got a nice sort of
That's a nice fizz on that.
foamy fizz. So yeah, 4.6%. And this was bottled, well, cider from 2020, which a lot of you will remember as a terrible year. But for apples, it was a really good year. We had lots of sunshine, which made some really nice fruit. We had a good crop, and it's made some excellent cider. So yeah, chin chin.
Cheers. Or wassail, we should say.
Yeah.
Oh, that's got a lot more of a fizz to it than the last one.
Yes, it's because of its process, it's very carbonated, so it's heavy carbonation.
Yeah.
But it really kind of lifts a lot of the flavours off your tongue. It bounces around.
Quite a lot going on with that. It almost goes sweet. You get the fizz and the sweet, and then it sort of dies back to a dry.
Yeah. You get the bittersweet tannins.
Yeah.
Landing
Kind
on
of
your
sort of
tongue.
rolls around your mouth a little bit. Yeah.
So it's had many descriptions since I've been making it, but a lot of them come back to the sort of dried fruits, sort of apricots and leathery sort of dates and bits and pieces like that.
Yeah. No, it's pleasant.
So it's it's almost like a hybrid between a cider and an apple juice. It's still got that fruity freshness that you get from an apple juice, that you don't get from a drier cider. The French tend to drink a lot of their sort of ciders lunchtime, so they'll sit down, they'll have lunch, and they'll drink a bottle of cider, because it's not high strength. It's quite refreshing, really. But it's really fizzy, good alternative to any kind of sort of Bucks fizz, or if you want a night off sparkling wine, you go for a Dolcetto.
So there's a couple of questions just to wrap up that I ask everybody. No pressure, they're just for fun. So the first one is, do you think you could survive on a Viking age diet?
Oh, yeah, I'd give it a go, I reckon.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Give it a go.
I think so. Yeah.
I guess it's difficult if you don't really, that's not your area, so it's a bit of a mean question.
No, well, as long as there was apples.
They had apples, but they would have been smaller, like crab apples and things.
Yeah, a belly full of crab apples might be not so pleasant.
Yeah, I don't know. And then, whether they would have fermented them, we'd covered that earlier.
Yeah, we're not sure, are we? But there'd be some good things, They made mead and lots of meat. So
your meat would be kept for your milk and your wool and things, and then in the winter you'd slaughter the animals. So you'd be mostly a vegetarian for a lot of the year.
But there'd be cheese, maybe.
Yes. Yeah. Cheese. Yeah, they would have made cheese. Yeah. I think in the earliest, so even pre-Vikings and Saxons, and I don't know if it was an accident, but they realised that by fermenting milk, you made it edible. Before that, they couldn't have milk. Yeah. So we've kind of over time evolved to get
stomachs have developed
to be able to take a cow's milk or a goat's milk or whatever. Yeah.
Well, I'd be fine then. Yeah, cheese, meat.
It's a cheese.
Yeah. Even if they're smooth and sour, it'd be fine. Yeah.
So the follow-on tied-in question to that is whether there's anything that you'd miss.
Well, if you've just got, there wouldn't be much sugar in your diet.
You'd have honey, but probably mainly for mead.
Yeah.
You might have malt extract. From beer.
Sought after, wouldn't it? Though it'd be for for making.
It's difficult to know, isn't it? Because whether they had less of a sweet tooth back then than we do,
Yeah.
or whether, you know, essentially we crave sugar and they probably did too. If they could get it, it probably tasted good.
Yeah.
It's a tricky one.
So yeah, sugar, and I think, you know, your bulky foods. Yeah. They would have had bread, wouldn't they? Which would do your carbs.
Yeah, mostly flatbreads. But
Flatbreads.
wealthier people would have had access to like a clay oven to make sort of
loaves
loaves of
and-
bread.
Yeah.
Yeah. Later in the period, they did have bakers and things as well, so you could actually buy your loaf.
You wouldn't have your pasta and your potatoes.
No potatoes,
You wouldn't have
tomatoes, chilies, all gone, chocolate gone.
no bell peppers, no nothing like that.
No. Pasta's an interesting one. I'm going to do an episode about it because whilst they didn't have it,
Yeah.
or at least we don't know they had it,
Yeah.
essentially it's eggs and flour.
Yeah. So it could have
sometimes
been
water and
produced, couldn't it? Yeah.
And they were making things like dumplings, so, but I won't go into it because
Yeah.
that's for another time.
Yeah.
But yeah,
So, you know, there's a few things I'd miss, but I think you'd be able to survive.
sounds like the more starchy stuff, potatoes.
Yeah, that's what
the
keeps you
carb.
going, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
I get hangry, so yeah.
All right, so where can people find you online? Are you on Instagram?
Yeah. We do Instagram, Facebook. I'm not very good at Twitter. I do have a Twitter account, but
Same thing for me.
just I don't really use it. You can email me. You can phone me up. You can just call in and see us. But yeah, Instagram, I'll post up things and normally get shared to Facebook.
Yeah.
Tend to post up most things on Instagram.
I'll pop some links underneath the video anyway, so people can find you.
Yeah.
Thanks for bringing along the cider. You should all try it. It's really good stuff.
Cheers. Thank you very much.
Thanks for coming on, and wassail.
Wassail.